Hey guys, the name is Kris Barocsi. Welcome to Comment Time 18. Today, we're going to talk about if you should ever pay more than $300 on a Tele, if all solid body electric guitars are created equal. I try to explain wet-dry rigs and how to take care of sticky, glossy neck finishes. I really appreciate seeing all the comments here on YouTube and on my Instagram. In case you are not familiar with my Insta channel, I'm pretty active. I post stuff every second day, whatever. And there are some really cool conversations going on in those comment sections as well. So if you're on Instagram and haven't found my profile yet, it's going to be on the screen right now. And yeah. One more thing, of course, check out the description box for timestamps, gear links, etc. I will put all the videos where I took the comments from in there as well. You'll find the links there. And I have some merchandise links as well, in case you want to check them out. It would support the channel, and I would really appreciate it. So let's get into this. First comment is from Commandery Goat. Hey Kris, I have an Eclipse lovely single cut guitar. Those are the ESP or LTD Eclipse guitars, beautiful ones. And I was wondering about taking the lacquer off the neck and getting a satin finish on it, much like one of those Larry Carton guitars you had a look at on the Thomann channel. Those guitars are great. Yeah, the guitar has a mahogany neck, and I believe it is more delicate than, say, a maple neck. What are your thoughts? And is it an expensive procedure? Any idea on the costs? I'd love to get an idea before I potentially make or break my already fine guitar. Well, first of all, I do get the idea. A satin finish on a neck just feels fantastic, especially when you're sweating on stage or in a rehearsal room. So I totally get it, and I think it's a nice thing to have, like a non-glossy finish on guitar necks. I wouldn't say it's the best idea to remove all of the finish on the backside of the neck of your Eclipse and refinishing it, because it's just probably kind of pointless because at the end of the day, if you just removed the gloss of the finish that's already on the guitar, you would get pretty much the same results as if you removed the whole finish and refinished it afterwards. For that, you can use these mesh pads. Let me show you a couple. Okay. Yeah, these will go from, I think this is the roughest one. It's like 1500 grit, and go up to, maybe the blue one was the finest one, I'm pretty sure, up to like 12,000 grit. So these are really, really fine. And if you use these wet, you will not sort of scratch the surface, but you will take away that gloss. That's pretty much the same thing as what I did on this Les Paul. Which was super glossy all through the finish, like the neck, the body, everything, and I didn't really like that. So what I did is I went for the finest one, 12,000. I used just a few drops of water on the sanding paper or pad, and went over it. Then tried the surface, then went for the next finest one, which one's like one step lower. What was it, like 8,000, I think. Let me test. Yeah, one of these. Maybe that's the 12, that's the 8. I have a paper somewhere. It doesn't say on the surface, which is stupid. But the ones you can get at Thomann, if I'm not mistaken, those will say in the middle which grit it is, so you cannot make a mistake. And go back to like 4,000, maybe 2,700, 600, whatever you have in that set. It's important to start with the finest one, which will be around 12,000, and then go step by step, like 12, 8, 4, or 5, whatever it says, then down to like 2, 7, 2, 3 maybe. maximum, because if you go even further, it will become completely matte at the end. And if you don't want that, if you still want this satin sort of semi-glossy kind of satin finish, then you should stop definitely around 3000 or 2000 something grit. And it's very important, of course, as told, to always sand wet. And also mask all those parts you don't want to satinize. The next comment came under my box of rock, my ZVEX box of rock video. And it says, it's from Crazy Like a Fox 1000. Good name. One of the best pedals on the market. You didn't do it any favors with your title and dialogue. The title was, Why Do People Love the Box of Rock? And on the thumbnail it said, Box of Rock or Box of Mud. Which... it's a little harsh, of course, but I think it's fair. Well, I have two things to say about this. First of all, the reason why I gave this title is because if you just call a video on YouTube, what a nice overdrive. Oh, this is one of the best ones. No one will watch it. And then why did you even bother making the video? That's unfortunately the reason why so many crazy titles and like clickbaity titles and thumbnails appeared on YouTube, because people started to become, well, sort of resistant. Let's say you make a review on a new pedal, whatever, the Wampler Pantheon Deluxe, which is a great pedal. And if you just call that video Wampler's new Pantheon Deluxe review, you will not get a lot of views, because that's just a boring title, even though it's the best title, because that's exactly what's happening in the video. But it's just how it is. People will not click. I mean, a lot of people will not click because, yeah, it's just not triggering them to do that initial, the click motion. Because, yeah, I mean, it's obvious. There's so many videos on YouTube. If you want to reach people and want to reach new people where your video got recommended by the YouTube algorithm, you need to trigger them to click. It's unfortunate, but it's just how it is. For the Box of Rock, which is a fantastic pedal, but it is muddy if you're not using it with the amp ZVEX, the makers, intended it to be used with. Which would be a Marshall, like a JTM or a Plexi. And if you're using it with something else that has a very different EQ curve, it will be muddy if you crank the gain. So I thought, well, you know, it's fair enough. It can be really muddy. But if you use it the right way, you can use it with any amps and you can make it sound incredible. And I think the sound speaks for itself. Like all the playing parts where I use the pedal in the video speak for itself. And also my final thoughts on the pedal were very positive, because I mean, I bought it and I didn't sell it, and I will not sell it because I love it. So why would I say negative things about it? But that doesn't change the fact that I can still be honest about it and just let those people know that it can be really muddy if you don't use it in a certain way with certain rigs and etc. Because I think it's important that people know about it. I didn't know, and I bought the pedal and I was really disappointed because it just didn't work with my rig. Let's move on to the next one. This came on Instagram, actually. I posted the intro solo playing of my latest video today, as of today, which was the does like a custom shop guitar make you a snob video. I'll put the link in the description, as always. And I was playing my Telecaster, this guy, which is a custom shop guitar, and it's a really expensive guitar, and it's just one of the nicest guitar ever for me. It's a subjective thing, obviously. And Robbie Finkel 79 wrote this under that like intro song playing. I can't believe people who would pay more than 300 US for a Tele. It's a piece of wood, no treatment at all. I love Teles, but they can't cost more than that money. Awesome tone, man. So this is a very interesting comment because it brings up, well, at least one very, very interesting subject, which is the simplicity of Telecasters. People kind of think that if a guitar doesn't have like curves, you know, like a belly cut or armrest or, I don't know, a binding or whatever, that those guitars should be like super cheap. That's interesting because you will find single cut copies and PRS copies and super crazy thin line guitars and whatever for under 200 euros or US dollars. All those fancy little details that make a guitar look more expensive or more complicated to make don't matter at all. Because as soon as you're using CNC routers and big machines and you produce a lot of guitars in a country where labor and like all the costs are minimal, you can do whatever you want. You can make a guitar look as complicated as it can get for just a few $100, really. So the fact that a Tele looks simple doesn't mean that a Tele is just I don't know, a shovel. So when we're talking about a Tele, and this is the second very important thing I wanted to talk about, if we're talking about a Telecaster or anything that's similar, let's say a Les Paul Jr., right? Those guitars have just a few pickups, just one or two pots, no crazy routing and whatever. It's just as simple as it gets. And for that reason, it matters even more how good those components are, how good the pickups are, how resonant the wood is, how well, I don't know, the machine heads keep the tuning, because nothing will help. It's just as simple as it gets. If the saddles are of the right material or not, how good the pots are, etc. All of these components matter even more, because if you start being cheap on any of these, you will immediately spot that. That's going to be a weak point because you cannot hide, right? It's just a simple body, a simple neck, a few frets, and just some hardware and pickups. If any of those are not really good, you will notice it immediately. It will not sound right. The sustain will be terrible, and the whole guitar will not have this fast attack combined with a nice and rich tone. That's a very hard thing to get right, and that's exactly the thing that you're paying for if you buy a more expensive guitar. The next comment is from Michael Breach, and this came under the video where I tried to explain the differences between a mono, a wet dry, and a stereo rig. And he asked, can you please explain the wet dry rig? Where does the guitar signal get split? All I see are 2 amps and a set of pedals. I get the confusion. It's a little complicated, but at the end of the day, it's not really that complicated. It's just you need to put your head around it. So first of all, if you have a wet dry rig, you will need 2 amps or 2 amp simulations, whatever you want to go with, but let's call them 2 amps. You just have one guitar, so that's the source of the signal, obviously. You will go through a cable into your drive pedals. Those should go in both amps, so at this point you just have one signal going. You can have 1 or 15 drive pedals, whatever you want. Just make sure that those are still like in one mono signal path. After those drive pedals, you can decide to split the signal already if you want to keep one of the amps like proper dry. Like you don't want any modulation like chorus and flanger and none of those going in the dry amp, then you already split the signal. For that, you definitely need something like a splitter or ABY or whatever kind of box that will have a phase knob with which you can change the phase of one of the amps. That's very important because you will recognize the tone as soon as it just sounds thinner when both amps are on compared to the right phase, what you can just toggle back and forth between with that phase knob. Because then all of a sudden it will sound richer, fuller, etc. So that's very important. That happens a lot, that one of the amps is going to be out of phase for whatever reason. So that's very important, the phase knob on there, on that switcher or ABY pedal. And the second thing is that one of the amps has to have an isolated output from this ABY. So these are the two features that needs to be on that splitter. For that, I use the Layla P-Split, which is a very simple little thing. It just needs the input, like you put your signal in it, and then you get two outputs, and one of them will be isolated. It's like ground isolated, so there's not going to be any hum issues going on. And you can also switch the phase on one of the amps to get rid of that problem as well. So those are the two important things. You have to think of phase and ground isolation for one of the outputs. From there, you go back in your pedal board for the wet amp and go through all the other effects you have, whether it's a modulation or a time-based effect. And then from the output, you go in your wet amp. And the dry amp already has the signal because from this P-Split, Layla P-Split, you go into the dry amp's inputs. So that only gets the drive pedals and none of the other effects. That's how I always did it. And because I'm using a pedal switcher on my board, I had to put this P-Split, this Layla splitter, in one of the loops. And that loop has to be right after your drive pedals. Okay, so if you're using a pedal switcher, it's not more complicated. You just have to insert that splitter right in the middle. Like I had, I think, like 2 or maybe 3 drive pedal loops on my switcher. Those were the first ones, the loop 1, 2, and 3. And then in loop 4, I had my P-Split, which then gave the signal, the dry, clean or overdriven signal to the dry amp. And for the wet amp, I went back in that 4th loop return from the splitter, the P-Split, and went through my last 2 loops, which were a modulation loop and a delay and reverb loop. And that went into the wet amp. I hope this makes any sense. It's more complicated to explain it than to actually sit down and just patch things up. Last but not least, let's grab a comment from my last video that came out before shooting this video, which was the Custom Shop Guitars Make You a Snob video, where I talked about like the differences between custom shops and normal production guitars and modded mass-produced guitars, etc. And this came from Dream Dancer 11. All solid body electric guitars are made equal. See the Lord and Savior CNC. The main difference is that the cheap ones have zinc metals and cheap plastics, while the expensive ones have good stainless steel ones and bone. The only thing a modded guitar can't give you, that a custom shop can, is status. If status is of importance, you need to spend several extra thousands for nothing really. If it isn't though, any cheap guitar modded with good parts and a decent setup will do. I don't need the bullshit from a custom shop maker to sell me thousands of dollars more for a high-end instrument just because he rolled a fretboard. Please. Okay, so this is, for example, the kind of comment that I was talking about in the video. I cannot believe that someone who sees things like Dream Dancer have ever went to a workshop and talked to a luthier and saw what they're doing, how they're doing it, listen to the reasoning of all the decisions they make, like why they are choosing these and those kind of wood and parts and why does that take so long, etc. You don't pay a lot if you're buying a custom built guitar, boutique guitar, whatever, because of that beautiful setup. Because if you go to a good guitar tech, you can get that kind of setup for just a few $100s, really. Like if you want the fretboard edges to be rolled off, if it's not a finished maple board, it's doable. If it's like a rosewood board, you just have to know what you're doing. Then you can roll off the fretboard edge, then make sure that the fret ends are super smooth. That's just a setup thing. You're not paying for that. You're paying for something that if you don't miss, you don't have to pay any money for. If you feel like, I don't know, a Squier Classic Vibe Tele is as awesome as it is, like stock, as a custom built T-type guitar or even a custom shop Fender Telecaster, then you don't have to spend any money on those. Just forget about them and play the non-expensive ones and you're good. But if you ever get to compare like an affordable mass-produced guitar and just sit down with a really nice amp that you can turn up and compare it to one or two boutique T-type guitars, I cannot believe that you would say the things you are saying. Even CNC produced guitars will have a lot of handworking at the end. So someone will be there with a sanding machine and make sure that the rough CNC routing is gonna end up feeling like an actual guitar, and someone will have to finish it, and someone will have to fret the guitar, because you cannot like fully build a guitar in a factory without any human beings. So it's we're not there yet. There are people involved in a guitar building process, and if a luthier takes care of all the steps, it's gonna end up being such a different animal. And of course, let's not forget about the wood treatment, like all the timber that a custom shop or a private luthier will use. If you ever saw any of these huge ovens where they artificially dry wood, like relatively fresh wood, you know, they just cut and got from whichever supplier, like wood supplier, those are going to be like pretty new. Like a few months ago, those were trees probably. And then they have to dry them artificially in like super crazy ovens, like huge rooms that are very dry and hot. And that's just a different drying process. It's not as stable as if you let a blank of wood sit in a dry place for 20 years, which is something that boutique makers will always do, all of them, because they know what they can expect from a blank of wood that's going to end up being a neck or a body or one half of a body, if it's going to be glued together. Those wood pieces, those blanks are just so much more stable, so much, well, it's just the natural way of drying wood. And you can ignore it, of course, and you can say like, blah, blah, blah. But it's just going to end up being a guitar for 100 years because they know how to treat wood to make a really good guitar out of them, like a piece of art, really. And that will cost a lot more money. And yeah, It's up to you to ignore or appreciate this fact, but this is not about the fretboard edge and I don't know what. Keep all the awesome comments coming. I'll see you down there in the comment section. If you have any questions, anything you want to share, add to whatever I said in this video, or just whatever's on your mind, let me know in the comment section below. Okay, see you next week in a new video, and meet you down there. Bye-bye.